Warfare is always evolving, sometimes slowly. Napoleon's armies traveled only as fast as those of Julius Caesar, sometimes faster than commanders can even process. See, for instance, the futile carnage of World War I. The pace of change on the battlefield today, well, it's fast, very fast. Introducing the Pentagon's first war brought to you by artificial intelligence. In the first 10 days of a campaign that may very well have been prepared in a hurry, the U.S. and Israel pinpointing and targeting as many Iranian sites in the first 4 days, rather, of the war as the anti-ISIS coalition did in the first 6 months of its campaign in Iraq and Syria. That was just a decade ago. How good are AI-informed kill orders? Are computers already making the call? The New York Times reports that it's probably humans who mistakenly decided to hit a girls' school, killing 175 in southern Iran. And even though outdated intelligence may be to blame, we'll ask our panel what role AI may have played and what responsibility do tech companies bear when their tools lead to war crimes and mass surveillance. In the current battle between the company Anthropic and the U.S. government over the proper use of its software, is it the company or the state that gets final say in the use of a technology whose power we don't yet fully grasp? Today in the France 24 debate, who gives the kill order? We're into the hard part when it comes to AI in times of war. Tech entrepreneur Tariq Cream, founder of the think tank and newsletter Cybernetica.fr, has written. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for inviting me.
Human rights lawyer Kemi Gosson, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Hinzian researches and comments on artificial intelligence and geopolitics as a tech consultant. How are you?
I'm good. What about you?
I'm okay. Peter O'Brien, editor and host of our Tech 24 show. How are things?
Good, Francois.
On the go, by the way, you can listen to the show wherever podcasts are streamed. When asked about that U.S. Tomahawk missile that hit a girls' school in the southern Iranian city of Minab on February the 28th, day one of the war, the U.S. president said he didn't know about it. His administration says it's investigating. Now, again, the Times reporting, this is one of their visuals from the article they posted, putting the strike down to a human decision based on outdated data. The target coding provided by the Defense Intelligence Agency, the military agency that helps develop targets, labeled the school building as a military target when it was passed to Central Command, military headquarters overseeing the war, according to people briefed on the preliminary findings. Then when the Defense Intelligence Agency's targeting data is older, intelligence officers are expected to use imagery or data from another entity. It's called the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency to update and verify the target. So, yeah, Peter O'Brien, what we learned is that there's lots of layers of bureaucracy inside of the Pentagon, different organizations, and at the end of the day, a tragedy.
Yeah, CENTCOM is based in Florida, so that's the U.S. Central Command for the Middle East. And what we're headlining on this debate is the kill chain, the kill order, and how that process has been massively sped up by AI. The kind of catastrophe that we've seen with the strike on this girls' school could have happened 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. It's a case of old information.
Yeah, in fact, Americans remember, and Europeans too, that strike on the Chinese embassy in Belgrade during the war in Kosovo, and it was because the maps were out of date.
Yep. What I would say is that AI has now multiplied by a factor of 10, 20, 30, the speed at which targets are acquired. And even though the American military is at great pains to point out that humans are still pressing the ultimate button, and following on from the work of AI and all the intelligence gathering, they are the ones to call the shots on when to fire, a human being that is. The amount of targets now being designated in a day means the likelihood of things like this happening only increases.
Hinzian, what do you make of, again, we're going on what our reports say, in particular that New York Times story. what does this tragedy tell you?
Yeah, so for me, first, you have to understand that this is unfortunately not something new, that the American forces have had a couple of issues and of mistakes of this sort. And saying a mistake when you are talking about people's lives and innocent people's lives is actually not acceptable, because that's not what war is supposed to be about. So there has been an effort in the past couple of years, I think it's been like about 10 years, to actually have a coordinated task force in the American government to make sure that civilians are protected. And that task force had budget and had people working there, about 200 people. And their goal was actually to support the military in those strikes and to make sure that whenever there is a mistake, that there is a true investigation afterwards, and that they learn from their mistakes, because eventually there can be man-made mistakes, but civilians have to be a priority. But that task force, specifically because of last year's decision by the president, the American president, to cut into federal budget, has just by definition been let go of. So they've been trying to get back to the center.
So there's no oversight.
There's no oversight, and there have been efforts, because there was the 2015 strike in Afghanistan on the hospital that served as a wake-up call back then under the Obama administration, saying that we have to do something and there needs to be a task force in government. And there was one, and a lot of very talented people were working on interesting things, but then it was just let go of, because today it's not part of the what was called the warrior ethos by Pete Hegseth, Secretary of the Department of War. So this is, I think, a very dangerous thing, because even if you look at it in a very pragmatic way for the military, I've heard a general saying that for each innocent person that you strike, you actually make 10 or 20 more enemies. So it means even if you look at it at a very operational, very military side of things, it is extremely dangerous for the USA in the region and for its operations in the world.
Camille Gosson, is a mistake the same as a war crime?
It's not. And if you look at the Rome Statute, you have different crimes, international crimes, that can be prosecuted by the ICC or just other, like for example in France, we also have in our French law, we have war crimes, crimes against humanity, the same as in the Rome Statute. But under the Rome Statute, a mistake cannot be a war crime. It cannot be prosecuted. Even if it's a gross negligence, it cannot be prosecuted as a mistake. The only way to have it prosecuted will be that if the court can find a violation of the principles of international humanitarian law, which are part of international custom now and are recognized as having to be complied with by the soldiers on the ground and by their commanders. And so if one of those principles, which is the principle of precaution, which is that the armed forces, they have to take all the possible and feasible precautions before striking, if it is found that those precautions were not taken, then it could be a war crime. But it's not going to be just for a simple mistake. You're gonna have to show that there were obligations that were not complied with to prosecute it as a war crime.
All right, Tariq Karim, you heard him mention what happened in Afghanistan in 2015. Questions about the new technology. This is not a new debate. This isn't, because we remember all the discussions over the use of joysticks at Central Command in Florida for drones that were being used in Afghanistan. This is not something new. What is different this time with this girls' school in Iran?
So in general, what we have, first of all, I think this is the first generative warfare. Generative AI is used at the core of this war. But let me just scale back a bit. And then there's two things happening at the same time. And this war is actually showing us that on one side, the battlefield became a data field. We are now, everything is data. If you want to win the war, you need to have access to all the data. We saw that in Ukraine, and we're seeing that here. But in the meantime, there's something else that is interesting, and especially now with the use of a company that is a public company, a consumer that has a consumer side like Anthropic or ChatGPT, is that the consumer internet, the internet we use every day, is also becoming extremely militarized. It means that now you could see that with the targeting of certain data centers in the Middle East. We target a specific place because they're being used by the U.S. Army, but they also run other services like financial service, credit cards. So you have the conjunction of these two things. What is new today is that we have a compression of the decision cycle. It used to be weeks or even months before specifically choosing targets. Now you can select targets. They talk about a target selected every 20 to 45 seconds. So the question you could ask is...
Yeah, because in the old days, you'd get like if you were a general, they would give you a printout. You would maybe take a week and read over it and argue it.
Yeah.
And now the question is, when the decision cycle is so short, the question you could ask is, first, can a human actually understand what they're doing? And the second thing is, of course, if the AI is right, do we have the time to stop it and make a different decision? There's a lot of questions behind that.
What's the answer?
Probably not. I mean, would you be able to figure out things every 20 seconds? I think we're not designed for a real-time, heavy computing system. We need time to think, and I think we...
So in other words, you're saying if doing it every 20 seconds is impossible, what you're saying is that already there are automated kill orders.
By omission, probably, yes.
The Financial Times quotes a senior U.S. defense official about that school in southern Iran. This official, who asked not to be identified, said, "A machine, a human, I'd like to believe AI can point out flaws like this in theory. Unfortunately, combat is never as pristine as the technology is designed to be," he said. How much artificial intelligence informs human decisions? High on everybody's minds, particularly, and you heard Tariq Krim mentioning Anthropic, which is in the throes of a mighty standoff with the Pentagon currently, as Monty Francis reports.
The Pentagon has refused to say whether artificial intelligence was used to mistakenly target a school in Iran near a naval base, resulting in the deaths of 175 people, mostly children. But the Wall Street Journal first reported that the U.S. military was indeed using AI for a range of purposes, including to identify targets for Operation Epic Fury. Last week, the Defense Department said it was cutting ties with its tech of choice, Anthropic's Claude, after the company's CEO, Dario Amodei, demanded that the government put up some guardrails for how the tech was being used, including assurances that it would not be used to power autonomous weapons or for mass surveillance at home.
I'm concerned about the autonomous behavior of AI models, their potential for misuse by individuals and governments, and their potential for economic displacement.
In response, the Pentagon argued it was not up to a private company to determine how the tech could be used on the battlefield. And Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth went a step further, announcing that he was labeling Anthropic a supply chain risk, prompting the company to file 2 lawsuits against the government on Monday, arguing the designation violated its free speech and due process rights. The company said it would not be swayed by intimidation or punishment, adding, Anthropic's reputation and core First Amendment freedoms are under attack. Last Friday, President Trump said he was ordering federal agencies to stop using Anthropic's tech, allowing them 6 months to phase it out. But there are reports that Amodei is still in talks with the Pentagon to possibly hash out a deal. Sam Altman, the CEO of the Microsoft-backed OpenAI, has since announced a deal with the Defense Department to provide technology on the government's classified systems.
All right, Sam Altman spotting an opportunity there. Peter O'Brien, who's got the upper hand in this? Who blinks first?
It depends if you're looking short-term, medium-term, long-term. I think it's too early to say whether OpenAI or Anthropic are winning the communications battle around this particular saga, but there will be more sagas to come. What we can see
right now, there's a war going on. Who needs who more? If Anthropic says it's going to be our way or the highway, what can the Pentagon say?
That's an interesting question. I don't think that Palantir will find it too difficult to swap out Yes, in the short term, it's going to be a total nightmare getting rid of Claude, given how integrated it is in the targeting.
This is the large language
system.
model of Anthropic.
Yeah, so that's in something called the Maven Smart System, which the US military uses throughout its operations. That's at the moment built by Palantir, a US software company. Previously, it was actually pioneered by, a lot of the pioneering work behind it was done by Google. Claude is integrated into this. So yes, it will take a few weeks or months to de-integrate Claude and put ChatGPT in it. But the point is, the Pentagon is saying this technology is crucial to the defense of American military interests and to our military objectives. So it is AI, you can clearly see playing out here, is a fundamental part of how a modern military works. That's what we're seeing now. There's no getting around it. We're not going to go back to it taking weeks to pick targets. It's now, from now on, it's always going to be a matter of seconds.
So Dario Amodei, the head of Anthropic, is he a knight in shining armor? He's saying, regulate me, put some guardrails up. I don't want to do business with you if I don't know for sure that we're not following procedure.
That is going to be difficult because, as one of us said earlier, it's that AI is still difficult to grasp, including and most importantly by lawyers and the ones who are making the laws. But there are already people thinking about it. The Office of the Prosecutor of the ICC released a policy in December 2025, and their view is that international law is already enough and sufficient to grasp AI and its use, including in the military, and we already have the rules to prosecute people who would misuse AI or for ill intent actions.
So hang on a second. Are you suggesting that Dario Amodei is not doing this because he wants to do good for humanity, but because he's afraid he doesn't want to wind up in front of the International Criminal Court down the line?
I don't know what his idea is, but he actually, like any other individual, could be held responsible by the ICC if it is found that the tool that he has created and that is being used has some kind of default or deficiency that would characterize as something that should have been more precautionary created. And so you were raising the question earlier of who could be held responsible. It's not only state officials that can go before the ICC, it's also individuals and entrepreneurs. It's not been the case, it's not been done yet, but it could be the case.
Dario Amodei, Tariq Krim, you've worked in Silicon Valley. What's the word on the street about him?
Well, first of all, you have to remind everyone that beside the war in Iran, both of his companies were raising funds, and they've both had some of the biggest rounds ever in history of Silicon Valley. We're talking about 30 billions and 100 billion for OpenAI. So now they need contract, and government contract are essential. This is also one of the reasons I think OpenAI rushed. But the other thing that is interesting, when you look at the precise points that Dario was pointing about, the mismatch with the Department of War one was about autonomous weapons and the other one about mass surveillance. But on the autonomous weapons system, he didn't say, we don't want to do this. He said, the technology that we have today is not ready. Maybe in a few years, you cannot use it now. That was very, he reiterated this in an interview. But the other question is, of course, the question of surveillance, because now AI allows you to access so many data that you can reconstruct a surveillance machine. I was talking about this in my newsletter, a former Google person recreated with his own system and using Claude, the exact same system, geospatial system, but you can follow with open source data, the war minute per minute, like with the
You don't even need to hack anymore.
No, because the story that we don't talk about that I think is very crucial is AI, especially what we call agentic AI, the new where Claude and Anthropic is very good, is actually disrupting everything from financial services, from lawyers, from government services, but it also disrupts the army and a lot of companies.
How is it disrupting?
Because suddenly companies like Palantir, who sell their product for billions, I think the Maven contract was expanded to 1.3 billion. Now these tools can be redone with technology like Claude for way cheaper and on your own computer. So there's a massive change ahead. And I think we have in this war, we have in the disruption of the AI, and we also have these two companies trying to grab as much money as they can now that they raised and they need to deliver. So you have a very complex system with private interest, public interest, and also the interest of the Pentagon.
And just on the surveillance thing, they only care about mass surveillance when it comes to US citizens.
Of course.
Anthropic and OpenAI have now said that those are red lines. They don't care about us. They don't care about The Hague, frankly, because they think they're sitting on top of the most important technology ever, arguably. So it's really about the US now and how much power the US can wield, and the fact that the US can now carry out whatever military campaign it wants, thanks to a supercharged targeting system that's powered by AI.
All right, and that brings us back to the point that you made earlier. It's not Anthropic on its own. Anthropic key to the Pentagon's war right now. So is the system that Peter mentioned. It's provided by Elon Musk's one-time partner at PayPal, Peter Thiel. His Palantir providing something called the Maven tracking and analysis software. The head of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, that's a U.S. military agency, gave a speech last year. His name is Vice Admiral Frank Whitmore. In it, he said that Maven has decreased targeting workflow timelines by a substantial amount, with one war-fighting element's targeting cells seeing intelligence operation timelines drop from hours to minutes, from sensing to target engagement during a recent exercise. That speaks again to this common thread we've had throughout this discussion about the speed of it all. But again, it's the question of what is the motivation behind, on the one hand, these private companies, and on the other hand, the U.S. military.
Yeah, and for me, actually, the real question is also a question that was expressed by some employees at Google and OpenAI who wrote letters, who wrote OPAs to make sure that the public knows how much of a big threat this is. And the question is, if we have those automated weapons, are we okay with the fact that the final choice to actually target somebody is going to be made by a machine and not by a human being? I think that goes back also to what you were saying. If we can't even own the fact that we are killing people on the battlefield and we're letting machines do that and make that call, then there's actually no end to it. Then there's just going to be a total green light on, okay, so this is the target, and these targets are prioritized because that's what it does. Prioritized by the AI, and it's totally autonomous. And so the final choice to kill is made by a machine. I think that the importance, and it's also what has been pointed to by employees at these companies, AI companies, is the importance here is on the fact that the final choice has to be made by people, because you are waging war as a society. AI is simply a tool. And if we don't make sure that it is something that is deeply talked about and discussed about, we're just going to create a new monster, and it's going to be very hard to control, because humanly speaking, you can't control something that can actually make a decision every 20 seconds or 30 seconds. And the general that was speaking a bit earlier was saying that this is a technology that helped military people and generals and officers in general make decisions in a shorter span of time. But that's not necessarily what war is about. War is not about being able to kill as many people as you want or as you can in a short amount of time. It's about having a true win. And the true win, and what also Pete Hegseth talks about, the warrior ethos, is being able to inflict true lethal energy on your enemies, but also to be benevolent to the civilians. Because if you actually kill indiscriminately everybody, then what's the difference between you and those people that you say are the bad guys? Because then it's just like an endless cycle, and there's no way out of it. And it's actually that dismissal of civilian deaths is actually one of the reasons why the foreign policy of the United States, especially in the region, has been so terrible, and more people are not supporting the United States in the region.
All right, that's the second time that you've mentioned the U.S. Secretary of War. So let's listen to him.
It's important. He's an important guy.
Back in January, Pete Hegseth visited Elon Musk's SpaceX facility in Texas. There, the war secretary, again, was all in when it came to putting AI at the service of the U.S. military.
The result is a risk-averse culture that prevents us from providing our warfighters with the best resources that America has to offer. That ends today.
Peter O'Brien, he said he's all in with AI. Why is he all in with AI?
Because he sees just how much quickly decisions can be made with it, I think, is the base technological reason. There are other more nebulous reasons that could be at play. As humans, we want often to escape responsibility and also to pick the quickest and easiest path. So that's why when we're saying around here that it's so important that humans remain the final touch of the button, well, if that's the case currently, which by all accounts it still is, the temptation in the future for that to no longer be the case is very, very strong, because you've got something that you look at that seems to be so much more quicker, more intelligent than you are, and capable of understanding so much more of the operation than you do. The temptation to let it do more of the work is very strong, both because you can deny that you were ever responsible for a mess up down the line, potentially, and simply because it's the easier thing to do.
Tariq Krim.
Yes, the thing is, now you have two military industrial complex. You have the 1.0, the traditional one, building bombs and planes. And now you have a new one, a 2.0, that is actually close to Peter Thiel's and all his associates like Elon Musk, that is basically building software and AI. And when we hear this, what we hear is that this new generation, this new group of companies want to be closer to the Department of War. They want to make sure to have the healthy contracts. But in the meantime, what is fascinating is the two companies that really owns AI, OpenAI and Anthropic, are not really part of this. As you know, Musk and Sam Altman departed ways before because they have a big of a fight, because initially OpenAI was funded by Elon Musk and he was kind of kicked out by Sam Altman, and Anthropic doesn't want to do exactly what the government wants to do. So you have to see what we're seeing right now is that there's a change. When you say we're going to do more AI, that also means we're going to spend more money in software and less in bombers.
Because the history of U.S. tech has always been linked to the Pentagon. IBM and Xerox became multinational corporations because they got Pentagon contracts.
But they were not part of the Peter Thiel ecosystem. That's what we have now. Is we have a new ecosystem of companies with Andreessen Horowitz, with Funders Fund, that is the fund from Peter Thiel. So you have a selected group of companies who have a preferred treatment at the Pentagon right now.
So you're saying this PayPal mafia, these guys who all work together at PayPal
are number 2, number 3 at the Pentagon. So they were part of the package deal with so they are very influenced, and they are moving also. That's a thing. They're moving forward something more technologically available, and they sometimes try to go a bit faster than the technology can do it.
And not long ago, which is interesting, is that those AI companies, including Google, OpenAI, they had in their statutes, founding statutes, that they pledged more or less not to use AI in military and warfare situations. So they went back on that, and that's why a lot of employees are like, we didn't sign up for this. I mean, we were supposed not to be the guys who were involved in the military.
And I just thought I'd put it very plainly. Many people developing AI think they are developing something which is going to be as powerful as the atom bomb was. They genuinely think things like autonomous drone swarms will be a weapon of mass destruction. They think it will be incredibly easy to design incredibly destructive bioweapons and chemical weapons using AI. That is why the US military, more than anything else, wants to make sure they're the ones commanding this technology.
And when you hear Tariq Krim talking about how the companies like Anthropic don't want to be beholden as much to the Pentagon, does that mean the private sector will have that kind of power that you described?
This is the tension that we're now seeing with the Anthropic thing. This is why it's so unprecedented to have a contractor for the US military say, hang on a sec, we're not sure we want to be involved if you're going to do that with it. Which from my recollection, we've never had a private company push back in that way. It's cost them their deal with the Pentagon. It's gained them plaudits from people who are now downloading Claude instead of ChatGPT. But it does ask the question, who is going to be in the control of this technology in the future? Will it be a private company? Will it be the US government?
Yes, I was going to say, when you look at what's happening right now, most of the armies of the world, especially China, say we need the same thing. So suddenly we have also a new AI arm race. Everybody wants to make sure that they are operating at the same speed, but not everyone has access to the core technology. So it's going to be an interesting development.
Camille Gosson, you have the United States, which has always attracted business because it's this place where if you had a grievance, you could take it to the courts. There was the respect of due process. You heard Xian address that point at the beginning. Even inside, you have oversight committees in places like the Department of Defense. Is the United States changing? Is it no longer? How will this impact not just human rights, but will that scare away investors or bring more of them, you think?
Is the US changing? I think it's a very interesting question that we all ask ourselves every day when we wake up under the current administration. Especially as a lawyer, the law has been changing so much, and the US not only attracts business, but it's also a big matter for law in general in the world. So is it changing, and how are we gonna grasp it? And it's the law has always been slower than human development and progress, and with AI, as we've all said since the beginning, it's getting even quicker. So because
listening to the rest of the panel, it sounds like the Wild West right now.
Yeah, but and the contrast with the law is gonna increase even more. But as I've said, we've actually already have all the tools in our different legal systems to grasp it and prosecute potential criminal behaviors. The only question that is going to rise at some point is whether we use AI ammunitions and weapons that are autonomous and that make decisions by themselves. Then in that case, we don't have in the law any prohibitions against that, I believe, at least in international law, but we have prohibitions against other type of ammunitions and weapons, and so the law could be changed to grasp these kind of weapons and to adapt, but it's gonna ask people like you guys who are expert in the matter to actually gather in a room with lawyers to decide how it's gonna be written and how it's gonna change to grasp every scenario possible.
For the time being, it's not the trend in the United States. Last year, we had Donald Trump unveiling a plan to deregulate artificial intelligence. It was a plan written up by his AI czar, that's how he's called, David Sachs. By the way, David Sachs, part of that same so-called PayPal mafia as Peter Thiel and Elon Musk. So it's quite a closed quarter there. Do you think, because this was last year, Xian, do you think it's still the case, listening to how there's now this race to control the use of military AI?
So the American, at least the Trump rationale behind the AI is American dominance in AI. It's dominance, the word that's being used. And the reason why they're using that word is obviously because China has been developing so quickly in AI that it is seen as a huge threat for the United States. So there was, before the Trump administration, sort of a wave in the United States, especially at the local level in states like Utah in California, to regulate AI a bit more. But because this new administration is focusing on deregulation so that it can face the Chinese AI development and boom, so even at the local level, a lot of states are actually holding back. So even if there is outrage,
we know when it comes to China, they don't let companies do whatever they want.
That's the thing. So people assume China is just totally deregulating, but that's not the truth. They actually have a very smart system, which is not comprehensive like what we have in the EU. It is more targeted and sector specific. And it is actually at some levels very, very, very strict, more strict than the USA. So I would say you have the EU model, which is total comprehensive laws around AI, which is not really good for innovation. You have the United States now with Donald Trump, who thinks that if you usher in a huge time for AI, then you're going to be able to fight China. And China China, who's just doing their thing, or they are innovating it at the same time. They are regulating very strictly on the important things, the things that really matter. So this is I don't see in the near future under this administration any change, even despite what's going on, any change in the way AI is seen. They're still going to seek to achieve this AI dominance. And how do they do that? By really opening the gates and having as much AI as possible, as just no regulation, zero or almost zero regulation at all.
Again, will this war change that attitude inside of the White House, and will it maybe that AI czar, David Sachs, will he look at it differently now?
Well, don't forget, this was a year ago when China was making rapid progress with DeepSeek and all these new technologies. China was almost at par with US top frontier models. And they had and they still have a very different strategy. When you use American AI, you subscribe and you do business deals to access the software. With China, everything is open source and given away. So you can actually build your own technology, especially military technology, using the Chinese models. Right now, what we see with this new agentic AIs, services like Claude are a bit further than what the Chinese are building. So that's why also Claude is so important to this operation, because without Claude, none of these would happen. Nothing would have happened at Maduro. Apparently, it was used there. It was used in Iran. It's going to be used for a lot of things. So the narrative of China is so close is true, but for the moment, the U.S. has some form of dominance in this kind of technology.
And you heard Hinz talk about it. In the middle is Europe.
In the middle is Europe, as always.
Perhaps India as well, but
yes, the middle powers. The middle powers. I think it's worth adding to this debate just a couple of points. One is the surveillance aspect that we've touched on is really important, because we're talking about actually the bottleneck has never been in terms of the amount of data that a military or a national security apparatus has had access to. If you look at the US, look at something like the Snowden files, what was released out of that, those leaks. You saw just how much data the US national security apparatus had its hands on at any one time. Now AI promises to speed up the amount that is being that can be used.
And has Peter Thiel's Palantir cornered the market on processing those huge amounts of data?
They've done a very good job at selling themselves as a critical pivot to helping governments do it when governments aren't able to do it themselves. They are the ones who are stepping in and providing an interface that governments can understand when they're using this. But actually the underlying tech, a lot of it is, AWS, for instance, Azure, that kind of things. But Palantir have done a very good job making it easier for governments to use. The other thing I was going to say was when we're talking about the US and China, just watch out if the US does become too dominant. Because if China starts to completely slip back and realize it doesn't have many cards to play in the AI race, it might start looking towards Taiwan more.
Camille Gosson, last week we had investigative reporters from Forbidden Stories, a consortium of journalists who are looking at facial recognition software that's been used in Iran. It's software that comes from Russia. But the journalists we spoke to said, we have the same things here, except we don't have a totalitarian or an authoritarian state in France. But you remember the controversy during the Olympics where the French government wanted to use, and I think it ultimately did, facial recognition software during the games for security purposes. What's the latest on that? Has there been any better definition of the rules?
No, there's not been any more precise definition. And hearing about the recent interactions, one of the main issues is the lack of transparency and the lack of how and which tools are used in lawfare, but also in broad and more civilians, even against civilians. We don't know about it, and so it's not regulated much, because we have to keep in mind that in a democracy, as in France, laws are usually pushed by people or by their representatives, and if we don't know much, then nothing much is going to happen. And so with those kind of scandals, we have sparks of reactions. But once that it has come down, nothing is moving more.
So, Tariq Karim, we have the legacy of Napoleon in this country. Yes, we have a democracy with elected officials, but we also have those state superintendents, the préfets. If a president comes to power who likes to lean on his préfets and it's the age of AI, how much can they do with this facial recognition, with the mass surveillance that Peter was talking about?
You were talking about it. I think we are in an age where the technology can do anything. And the question now is really, how do you organize, how do you use it in a proper way? And we, as you said earlier, we don't really know. But we're also in an age where a lot of these companies are looking for marketing, for fundraising. And one of the things that I found fascinating with, you were mentioning Palantir. Palantir, to sell to European governments, used the case of, the track of bin Laden and saying our technology was critical. We don't know if it really was, but it was a great marketing thing. And the problem is a lot of these companies have been pushing toward, we're working with the military as a sign of efficiency. And now if things go out of control, it might actually have the adverse effect. And people say, well, and I think that's also what, Dario Amodei, who's very smart, understand is that if they're becoming, because don't forget, these tools capture our most intimate thoughts. It's not about data, it's actually express thought. We ask things, it's written in French and in English, in proper language. So if suddenly they get attached to this idea of a mass surveillance, you can imagine it could be terrible for their business. And I think that's one of the reasons a lot of people are thinking is the business better than the business we have with the military? It is a question that every company right now in Silicon Valley is trying to assess.
Right. Closing arguments, by the way, taking place this Thursday in Los Angeles. This is a test case lawsuit, hasn't to do directly with artificial intelligence. It's against Meta and YouTube, the jury to decide whether social media companies should be liable for harms caused to children using their platforms. Depending on the outcome, thousands of similar lawsuits could follow. But again, it's a case, Hinzian, about whether or not there's harm being done by these big tech companies. So that will be watched closely in the field of art. At the end of the day, is it legislation, regulation, or is it a good old-fashioned lawsuits with a number that has lots of zeros behind it that will rein in the oversized power of these companies?
Probably a lot of both. And I actually think the lawsuits are very scary when you look at people, for example, it's a completely different field. But when you started having people like Bankman-Fried who started to have those huge 20 years jail sentences, that when you realize that if you mess up, it's going to be so big that you're going to spend your life in jail or maybe have so much debt that it's never going to end, then that's when you actually start to consider what you do. And I think accountability is absolutely essential in this. If you tell people, do what you want, and this is also the problem with Pete Hegseth's war ethos, it's a complete misrepresentation of what a warrior is. Warrior is somebody who kills enemies, but also who owns his mistakes and who doesn't hurt innocent people. So accountability here is knowing that if you mess up, there's going to be huge consequences, even if you're very powerful, even if you have a lot of friends. That's actually how you actually get the ball rolling to the front and make sure that you don't have accidents and I'm saying accidents because they're saying that. For me, you shouldn't have those accidents. It's just having kids killed or having hospitals that are targeted, because you can't say, oops, we messed it up. We didn't want to target a school. We wanted to actually target a military base, but it was a school. Sorry. So, yes, accountability.
And that'll be the final word for now. I see Camille Gosson nodding vigorously here, but unfortunately we're out of time. I want to thank you. I want to thank as well Tariq Karim, Peter O'Brien. I want to thank as well Hinzian. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.